Good morning, everybody. As Brian mentioned a few weeks ago, we started out in this soul detox series, and it is because our souls get all cluttered up, they get distracted, we get filled with all kinds of nonsense that doesn't do us any good whatsoever. Jesus spoke some great words in Mark chapter 8. This is what he said: "What good is it for a man to gain the whole world and yet forfeit his soul?" And the truth is, so many people, we focus on detoxing and keeping our bodies healthy. Lots of us have done that, and that's fine, it's good. But I'm talking about detoxing or keeping our souls healthy as we go through life. Now, we have defined the soul like this. The soul is our mind, will, and emotions. Now, our mind, will, and emotions are temporarily housed in this human body, but it won't always be that way because our soul is eternal. When our bodies wither and die and get put in the ground, our soul lives on. It's eternal. Our soul is the real us. That's who you really are. Now, the problem is our souls get put through the ringer here on this earth, and possibly like no other time in human history. If you think about it, in the ancient world, the day went from sunup till sundown. That was it. When it got dark, life kind of winded down. Nights were dark, mostly silent, mostly peaceful. Like, good night, John Boy. Anybody remember that? I just dated myself. But you know, John Boy was not shackled with maintaining his image on Facebook or Instagram, was he? He didn't feel burdened to share photos of his dinner at a trendy restaurant. John Boy's employer didn't expect him to be available 24 hours a day via text or email or by cell phone. Today, most bosses want that. And if you don't do it, they'll find some poor pigeon who will do it. And the truth is, it'll probably be someone who hasn't yet discovered that it kills a soul to be available 24 hours a day. At some point, it just all has to stop, or our souls will pay the price. So we introduced a few weeks ago this 1-minute pause, this wonderful little app that prompts us to stop at least once a day. Make it all stop. Take some deep breaths and remember whose we are, who we belong to, that we were created for union with God, and that life is more than just doing life at breakneck speed in order to accomplish more. And most times, it's for people who never care or will never acknowledge it anyway. And the 1-minute pause could be a lifesaver for you. So if you don't have that yet, you're interested in doing it, you can talk to one of us leaders here, but I would direct you towards Patty Van Cleve because she knows it inside out and backwards, and she will help you with it, okay? The point is, we answer for our lives to God first, and God wants your soul healthy and filled and energized by the only person who can truly fill and energize a soul, and that is God himself. We don't want to live with a depleted soul, like running on empty. My good friend Clark Whitten said, "You don't want what's at the bottom of my tank." And he refers to that state as sucking swamp gas. That's East Texas for you right there. The truth is, we don't want to live there. And if you're there now, it's time to get out. And God will help you. But there's a part of it that you have to own and part of something that you have to do. And that is to cooperate with Jesus and be open to the ways in which God will lead you out of that state and into greener pastures, into quieter waters. All right, so far in the series, we've kind of recognized the outward factors that try to press us into an unhealthy life, whether they be pressures from work or too much use of social media or family demands or really a host of other things that could be guilty of it. Those are outward things that will try to push us and get us to be out of step with God. And those are all true. Today I want to talk about an inward thing, really the inward thing that sabotages us as much or more than anything else on planet Earth. And it's subtle, but it's there. And it's there for every single one of us in this room or those that are watching online. And some great authors refer to this as the pull of the self-life. Say that with me, the pull of the self-life. Now, to get a picture of this, we're going to read a good section of the parable of the prodigal son, or the lost son, and it's found in Luke 15. We're going to start in verse 22, and here's how it goes. Now, this is when right when the son comes home and sees the father, and the father sees the son. The father said to his servants, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, it says, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. "Your brother has come," he replied, "and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never even gave me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him." Look at the response. "My son," the father said, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." Okay, so at the conclusion here, at this point in the story, the father and the lost son are filled with joy and they are celebrating. The older brother is miserable. Why? Well, the older brother believes that he has been wronged. He's offended and he's envious. And he starts comparing himself and his life with his brother's life, and it goes from bad to worse. He even starts yelling at his father for being grace-filled. He's yelling at his father. So he's just miserable. Okay, just step aside here. Quick parallel to our modern world today. Do you know that there is a direct connect between the rise of depression and one's use of social media? There is a ton of research that's been done on this, and it is current and accurate. And Forbes magazine did a summary of all this research, and here's how they put it. So part of the reason Facebook makes people feel socially isolated is the comparison factor. The comparison factor. We fall into the trap of comparing ourselves to others as we scroll through our feeds and make judgments about how we measure up. One study looked at how we make comparisons to others' posts in upward or downward directions. That is, feeling like we are either better or worse off than our friends. And Facebook, we all know, plays fast and loose with the term friends, right? Turns out that both types of comparisons made people feel worse, which is surprising since in real life, only upward comparisons make you feel bad because it makes it look like other people are better off than you. But in the social network world, any kind of comparison is linked to depressive symptoms. This study goes on. It says, "It's no secret that the comparison factor in social media leads to jealousy. Most people will freely admit that seeing other people's tropical vacations and perfectly behaved kids is envy-inducing. Studies have shown that social media use triggers feelings of jealousy. And the authors of one study, looking at jealousy and other negative feelings while using Facebook alone, is astounding, providing evidence that Facebook offers a breeding ground for resentful feelings." All right, back to the prodigal son story. Truth is, there's a little bit of that older brother in every single one of us. That story is thousands of years old now, yet the truth that it exposes is more powerful now than it ever has been. That brother could not celebrate the happiness of somebody else. The self-life in him was completely in control of his soul. His brother is home, safe and sound. He should be happy. His father, who was grieving, is now jumping for joy. He should be celebrating alongside him. But his self-life would not allow it. All he could see was that he was slighted. He felt wronged. He was offended. Their happiness actually made him feel worse. That, friends, is a sign that something is wrong. His father even goes out to console him, we read. He says, "My son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours." But the son won't hear it. He can't receive his father's generosity because he's so closed off. And this is what happens when the self-life is given free rein. Notice the son's comments. He says, "All these years I've been slaving for you, yet you never even gave me a young goat to celebrate." Slaving, really? This father hardly seems like a slave driver. Seems pretty gracious. He says, "Son, all that I have is yours." Does the father seem stingy? Far from it. So despite what the son says, is the father really the problem in the story? Not at all. The real problem is that the son, the older son, lives the self-life like a pro. He's offended, outraged, unable to celebrate the wins of others, worried and bitter about what he doesn't have. Like I said, there's a little bit of that older brother in every one of us. I mean, can you think of a time that you felt slighted, overlooked, unrecognized, unrewarded maybe? How did you take it? You don't have to say it out loud. How did you take it? It tends to get under the skin of the self-life, irritates it, can't get past it, can't let it go. Author John Eldredge says this. He says, this is the hidden danger of the stubborn self-life. He calls it the exalted me, the unsubmitted, unsurrendered self to the rule of Christ in me. It's hazardous to a soul, and it requires a detox. Why? Because the self-life is so easily offended, maybe even enjoys a little bit getting offended. Self wants things done my way, so it's continually making demands. And that's not hard for me to understand because my demands are perfectly justified. Mine are, anyway. I mean, I just don't like being interrupted or left out or being cut off on the 408, or I don't like being told what to do or how to do things. But I am perfectly reasonable. Just don't criticize my driving or my cooking or my teaching or my leading or my decisions or my rationale for things. I'm perfectly humble. Just don't ever challenge me. That's the self-life. That's the self-life. It is the self-life in us that keeps a record of wrongs. It holds those imaginary conversations with people that we would love to set right. And it writes those perfectly worded, scalding emails that we never have the nerve to send. That's the self-life in us. Now, lest we think that we are exempt because, hey, we're Christians, we're followers of Jesus, so it's all those pagans out there, the heathens out there that struggle with their self-life. No, no, no. In the book, Get Your Life Back, the author just squashes that thought. Listen to this first sentence. He says, oh, the self-life has a religious version. The self-life in a Christian gets irritated when a prayer time goes longer than we think it should. It feels wronged when a church service runs late or when the worship time goes longer than usual, or God forbid if the pastor is long-winded. The self-life wants to be asked in the small group how their life is going, but it feels righteously irritated when someone else is taking too much time talking about their life. The self-life Christian hasn't given a thought to the return of Christ because they are totally focused on the here and now, making sure things work out now. And it even gets a little bit bugged when people talk about any setting of our hope on the life that's yet to come. So is the Christian version of the self-life becoming clearer for us? I hope so. Now, one of the big shames, one of the big embarrassments of Christianity, and this is something that inflames both Christians and non-Christians as well, is the fact that people who call themselves Christians can still behave like idiots. Now, all of us have been guilty at some point in time or another, but some people just live there as if it's no problem, as if it never would need to be addressed. Just unapologetically embracing fear and worry and hatred. That's not okay. That's just not okay. The simple explanation is they have continued to operate out of the self-life. So when someone ticks them off or opposes their politics, they don't even hesitate to slander that person. Why? Because their offended self is at the helm of their life and love just goes out the door. Out the door. Like, you tick me off, so you're going to get an earful from me. Or if it's the non-confrontational type, you tick me off, so my friend is going to hear an earful of gossip about that person that ticked me off. That's all the self-life at work. And I will tell you that the enemy of our souls is behind all this, baiting us in ways that are hard for us to resist. In fact, it's probably true that the enemy has a kind of a secret hold in all of us, kind of an access point within. Maybe a very familiar temptation that we struggle with and one that we're pretty familiar with failure along the way. Pride, greed, lust, envy, rage, whatever it may be, whatever. Lucifer's fall was brought about by this prideful self-exaltation. In Isaiah chapter 14, look at what it says here about him. How you are fallen from heaven, O shining star, son of the morning. You have been thrown down to the earth. For you said to yourself, I will ascend to heaven and set my throne above God's stars. I will climb to the highest heavens and be like the Most High. So Lucifer becomes Satan, which is a term that means adversary. And Satan found in humanity the very same weakness and stubbornness and self-centeredness, and he leverages that weakness against us. I mean, think about it. Humanity chose to disobey God and reach for what we wanted, so in some sense we exalted ourselves over our Creator, Father God. Because we have inside of us the potential to replace God with self on the throne of our life. Now, some of us don't like to hear that. We find, no way. That could be hard for us to believe. I understand that, because none of us would ever willingly put ourselves up on the throne of our lives and pull God down. We wouldn't do that willingly. It's like, why would we? So we don't. We don't do it knowingly. But you know what we actually do? In our day, we are so used to choosing exactly what we want all the time, and that pampers the self-life. It feeds the self-life. What do I want to eat? What do I want to drink? What exact temperature and lighting do I want in the room? What music do I want in the background? If you were here the first Sunday of 2024, I brought up a very certain reality that we all deal with. We live with this, and it's this. People will rarely do what they don't want to do. People will rarely do what they don't want to do, especially in our day of endless choices. We're so trained to choose exactly what we want around the clock. The example I brought up was, there are 100 restaurants that will deliver to you in minutes. Each might have 100 variations on their menu. So you have 10,000 choices for dinner tonight. 1,000 channels on TV. 100 streaming services, each with 1,000 programs. It's like a zillion choices to watch tonight while you're choosing one of your 10,000 choices for dinner. And we wonder why the self-life is so overwhelmingly powerful. We've fed it and fed it and fed it for years. So to enter into a very needed soul detox, we got to declare war on the self-life. Because the self-life is very, very good at crowding out the life of God inside of us. So I want to present some thoughts about waging this war. It's a necessary one if we want to thrive in our relationship with God. But there's not sufficient time for that today. But what I do want to do here is just kind of wrap up with a point of clarity on this that's really, really important. And it's this. There are teachings out there. There are teachings out there that sound very righteous and they sound very holy. And those teachings basically say that anything that's connected to your humanity is the self-life. And it has to be crucified. Like any desire you have, any dream you have, maybe even your own wiring and gifting, those are all things that are contaminated by the flesh, and they have to be killed in order to move on with our devoted Christian life. Well, that kind of flawed interpretation of what God wants has deflated good-hearted believers and caused many to functionally leave the faith altogether. And beyond that, there's some seekers that have been looking for God and ran into this sort of strain of teaching, and they got turned off and took the next stagecoach out of town. Because they say that all parts of your humanity are bad. It's evil. Anything to do with your humanity is bad. But listen, that is not how God feels about your humanity. It's not. Why would our good Father say things like, I will give you the desires of your heart, or protect your heart because it's the wellspring of life inside of you? Why would he say those things if he just wanted to squash your desires and your dreams? Jesus never taught anyone to hate themselves. There's a lot of talk about this, about people groups that ought to hate themselves these days. Jesus never taught anybody to hate themselves. How can we love our neighbor as ourselves if we despise ourselves? Jesus always handed broken and misguided people graciously and with an intent for restoration. Always. So your personhood is not the problem. That's not the problem. It is who is at the helm of your life. Who gets to drive the bus for you? When we let this self-life rule, it clouds out our view of God and it hamstrings our ability to receive him. The self-life is a crushing burden to bear, and lots of us have experienced this and the frustration that goes along with it. So next week, I'm going to talk about a few things that will help us to detox our souls while not despising the humanity that God gave us. Because if you remember, go all the way back to the beginning, God created human beings and said what? It is good. It is good.